Welcome to the Rotary Club of LaGrange. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation given by Mike Wilson. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. Gracious God, we are so thankful to be able to meet here today in person, face to face. We pray, Lord, that you would give us a hedge of protection around our community, that we'll be able to continue that. Lord, we thank you today for the LaGrange Rotary Club and the work that we're able to do in our community, our state, our nation, and the world. We ask now that you bless us food to the nourishment of our bodies and our bodies to thy service. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. And then Cheryl Mack is going to introduce our visitors and guests.
Good afternoon. I would like to introduce to you today our visitors and guests. When I call your name, please stand. We have Gerald Wyatt with Duke Academy, CEO, guest of Molly Fulgham. We have Ralph Howard, owner of Whispering Hills, and he has guests that he has brought along with him. Nita Howard, Charlie Hubbard, Chris Cleveland, and Jen Howard. Thank you all for coming, and we hope you visit us again.
And we did not do birthdays and anniversaries last week, so I'm gonna announce last week's birthdays and anniversaries, and then this week's. So, member birthdays last week on July 17th was Bill Stump. On July 18th was Josh Williams. Member anniversaries, Kim Boatwright on the 18th for 37 years. And then wedding anniversary last week, Amy and Coleman Foss were 20 years, and Karen and Bill Honeycutt were 26 years, both on July 15th. Birthdays this week. July 23rd is Garrett Brubaker. July 24th is Larry Bragg. July 24th, Ken Gordon. July 24th, Bill Martin. Member anniversaries, Brian Dollinger on the 26th has been a member for 4 years. And wedding anniversaries, Jerry Scarborough and Carla have been married 29 years on the 25th. So let's give everybody a round of applause for this. Couple announcements, just please remember to silence your cell phones at this time. And then I have a couple of announcements. Immediately following our meeting today, there's two opportunities for makeups today. I'm sure most of y'all saw an email yesterday from Barbara in regards to the largest Rotary Club meeting ever. That's going to take place today at 1 o'clock, and we have registered. We're going to put it up on the screen here. If you can stay and participate, we'll have you sign in and submit that attendance. I don't really know what to expect. It's going to be a big Zoom meeting, and I kind of get the feeling they're trying to do a Guinness Book of World Record type event of as many people as you can get in one meeting at one time. So if you can do it, if you can stay and stick around, you can do that. Also, we're having a board meeting next door immediately following this meeting. So if you want to make up, you can attend that as well. Happy Dollar, we do have some time. If anybody has any Happy Dollar, I'll open this up for anybody.
I have 2 Happy Dollars. The first one's to make you all jealous. Molly and I are going to go see Barbara in Maine. And then the next one is to say I'm so thankful and grateful that we're going to have Ralph Howard come. He's worked hard on this project. We're once again going to be leading the way of something new. For today, it may be something like, oh my goodness, what is this green cemetery stuff, you know? But before long, we'll all be seeing, oh, it's here, it's there. He's already appeared his article already appeared with the Associated Press. That made LaGrange hit big time.
I just say, look out, Maine, is I guess about all. Well, I'm happy to introduce today's program. Ralph Howard's from LaGrange, Georgia. He was born and raised here. His first job was delivering newspapers around town. And it triggered in him a keen business mind and a entrepreneurship mind, and he's always been doing stuff like that. He went up to Atlanta to earn his bachelor's degree at Emory, and then went on to earn an MBA at Georgia State. And then in 1967, he started Cleantex over 50 years ago here in LaGrange. They went on to pioneer the first launderable rubber-backed mat that revolutionized the mat business. And it was kind of, like we were saying, the first right here in LaGrange. Now Cleantex is headquartered in Atlanta, and from there they oversee work in Asia, Africa, North America, South America, Europe. In honor of his years of service in the textile industry and the innovations that he's given to them, he received the Magnum Biggie Lifetime Achievement Award. But today, Ralph is here not to talk about Cleantex. He's taken that mind and that business and that entrepreneurship and focused it in a different direction. And it's, again, something here in LaGrange that's kind of a first or early adopter to an idea that he's going to tell us about where he grew up and what he's doing with it now. He's going to tell us more about Whispering Hills. To hear more about that, please welcome Ralph Howard.
I'm going to try to adjust the microphone just a little bit. I'm not too much of a microphone guy. Does that sound okay to everybody?
Yes, sir.
Good. Well, I appreciate being asked to address the Rotary Club today and explain the Green Cemetery project that I've been involved with on the north side of LaGrange. I asked Jason, I said, what information would the members be interested in hearing? And he said, answer the question, what is Whispering Hills? How did it come about? And what is green burial? So I'll attempt to answer these questions from the initial purchase of the land in 1946 up until today. This will be a rather autobiographical talk, personal saga, if you will, and I'm happy to share it with you. Before getting started, I want to mention I have some of my associates here with me that have helped me with this project. Chris Cleveland is doing the office management part and helping me with the marketing. And Shirley Hubbard is a tour director. That's one of the objectives, to try to get people who are not familiar with the project to come out and take a tour. And then after they take a tour and get used to the land, then they can, of course, come out on their own. And also my sister Jean, who's a partner in the project. So I welcome them here. And they're going to stick around when the meeting is over. If anybody wants to chat about anything, they'll be happy to stay. And also Jeff Higgins has agreed to stay and answer any technical questions. He was an early advisor, which I will explain as I get into this program. But I do want to say that I've written it out because based on the questions that Jason asked me to answer, I've tried to follow and answer those questions. But I'm going to stick pretty close to the written thing, because if I start rambling, I'll never get there. So I'm going to try to, you'll see me sort of refer to my notes from time to time to try to keep on track. I also, before I get started, I want to introduce my wife, Nita. And I'll mention that when I first got involved with this project at about age 75, she said, and I quote, "I thought you were retired." Actually, I am retired. Whispering Hills Memorial Nature Preserve is my retirement hobby. So I'm enjoying it. It's a lot of fun, and I'll now tell you how it came about. It's interesting how one thing can lead to another. This presentation is about the land where my sister Jean and I grew up, and our desire to preserve the rural nature of the land. I'll tell you what I remember about our childhood, and why Whispering Hill was created and what it is. The acreage is located on the Moody Bridge Road, Highway 219, about 6.5 miles north of LaGrange. You go up past the high school, past Ware's Crossroad, half mile on the right, we see a lot of white fences. That is the Whispering Hills project. It was purchased by our parents, Jean and my mother and dad, in 1946. I was born in 42, so I've lived there since I was 4 years old, and Jean was actually born there when we were living there. She was born there. So it goes back a long way in our family, and we have a lot of affection for the land, as you can imagine. She and I are very attached to the hills, the valleys, the streams. We have many fond memories of growing up there in the country rather than the town. We prided ourselves on being country boy and country girl. We had the horses, we had the dogs, we had the woods, we had it all. But one thing we didn't have, and we didn't know much about, was the recreational opportunities and so forth that are offered in town. Little League and things like that. We didn't participate in that. We had our own fun and games out in the woods. When we were children, the pavement on the Moody Bridge Road ended at the Concord Baptist Church. That's just a few hundred yards beyond the Ware's Crossroads, the church on the left. There was no phone service when we moved there in 46. And one early memory that sticks in my mind, early one Sunday morning, some people drove up. What are they doing out here so early on a Sunday morning? And what it was, somebody from town drove out to tell my parents that a friend of theirs had passed away. So we were in the country. There was no communication unless somebody came out and knocked on your door and spoke with you. So my neighbor, Jackie Hubbard, was a year younger than me, Shirley's husband. He lived on the property and still lives on the property today. He works with me and us to maintain the natural beauty of the land, fight invasive species and plants, which is always a problem. We don't want any kudzu. And in the late 1940s, he and I recall we could occasionally see a mule and wagon headed from the river toward LaGrange early in the morning. Late that afternoon, we would see it going back to cross the river and head on back to Heard County. Those farm wagons would haul in some produce and various things they had to sell into town, and they would sell what they could sell, and then they would buy the store-bought goods and take them back home. So that's how far back it was. It was country living, but not that long ago, but it was 75 years ago, on the other hand. Right. So the road past our house was eventually paved. Mules and wagons gave way to vehicles. In the early 1950s, there was less than 100 houses between our house and the 6.5 mile Moody Bridge Road into town. Less than 100 houses at the time. Today, there are over 1,000 houses scattered around in subdivisions between where I grew up and town. And there's a large Exxon service station with retail outlets being built on the southwest corner of the West Crossroads. So it's changed a lot. As Bob Dylan once said, the times, they are changing. So, in 1959, at age 16, I was sent to Marion Institute in Marion, Alabama for my last 2 years of high school. I was what my parents, I categorize myself as an unapprehended juvenile delinquent. My parents recognized the problem, put me in the car, and took me to the middle of Alabama and said, get out, this is where you're going to go to your junior and senior year of high school. And that was a big change in my life, and I'm glad that I went there. After Marion, I went to Atlanta, attended college, lived, worked, got married, and Nita and I had our 2 children while we were living in Atlanta. So now that would have been 64, 66. Let's fast forward to 1968. At the age of 26, I moved to LaGrange again with my family and pursued what turned out to be a 50-year business career with Cleantex Industries, Inc. And it was a wonderful career. I got to travel the world. I've been all over. To all of the free places. I never went to the bad places. I didn't go to the Mideast. I never liked the Mideast, the people over there, with the way they treated the women and that sort of thing. I went to nice places like London and Japan and New Zealand, Hawaii. It was a good life. So anyway, then the generations, naturally, they passed. After our mother died in December of 2000, Jean and I inherited 145 acres of rural land, where we grew up. The land was divided between us according to value. She developed a 45-acre horse farm on her portion of the property. I left mine in forest land. Then when the 2008 economic downturn came about, the horse farm proved to be uneconomical. And the land between our house, our home place in downtown LaGrange, was still developing. So Jean and I began to try to figure out what can we do to keep the development from overtaking our land, because as land develops, prices change, and it's hard to just keep a farm in the middle of a city, and the city's moving in that direction. So we began to try to figure out what were we going to do. Let's see here. I missed a page. Pardon me just for a moment here. So from then, what's I done here? Let me. Pardon me. Chris said, don't get mixed up with the pages. Sorry, Chris. So we began about that time after 2008 to try to develop and come up with a plan that would enable us to keep the rural landscape and the nature of the properties intact. We had fields, we had white fences, we had trees, we had streams. We had the Exxon station coming in up on the corner. So let's fast forward once again, this time to January of 2018. I made a foolish mistake in January of taking a walk on 17-degree morning when ice was on our driveway, and it was frozen under a nice cover of snow, and my feet went out from under me, and I hit the ground, broke the girdle on my right hip in 2 spots, and was laying out there in the freezing. I was unable to move or return to the house, but fortunately I had a cell phone, and I was rescued by the Troop EMC, I believe it's EMC, Emergency Medical people, and the Fire and Rescue Departments. I was taken to the emergency room in St. Francis, and sent to Columbus, and a couple of mornings later had a big operation. It turned out to be a nice success, thank goodness. And after 18 days at the Houston Clinics Rehab Center in Columbus, I returned to Grange, was confined to the house to undergo physical therapy and recuperate. Had a lot of time on my hands. And I read two really interesting articles in the April 14th, 2018 issue of The Economist magazine. One was entitled, "Death Disrupted, Great News for the Dead. The Funeral Industry is Being Shaken Up." That was the name of the article. The other, sorry about that. The other article was entitled, "Funerals of the Future." The basic premise of these articles is that for a variety of reasons, a profound shift in burial practice was underway in the world, and in the United States in particular. Consumers were becoming much more involved in planning their final farewell. In recent decades, a shift from the traditional burial practice toward cremations has been the main change from traditional burials. In traditional burials, the deceased body is embalmed, placed in a casket, often a metal casket, enclosed in a cement vault, and then buried. In a cremation, the deceased body is incinerated and reduced to ashes, called cremains, which are then buried, scattered, or as often the case, kept in a house in a little container in the family's residence. But, quoting from Funerals of the Future, cremation is not the only rival to traditional burials. A study in 2015 found that over 60% of Americans in their 40s and older would consider a green burial. In a green, or natural burial, the deceased body is prepared by a licensed funeral director without embalming. The body is placed in a biodegradable casket or shroud and simply buried. 5 years earlier, in 2010, the proportion of that age group's population who would consider a green burial was just 40%. So this rather rapid change in the public's attitude toward end-of-life practices presents a big challenge and presented a big challenge for the funeral industry. These articles introduced me to the concept of green burials and exclusively green burial grounds. And it occurred to me that this change in public perception might provide a long-term method and solution for Jean and me to preserve the rural nature of the land where we grew up, which we wanted to do. She and I discussed the possibility and decided to research the use of our land for a green cemetery. So from this point forward, the development, watching the clock, the development of Whispering Hills becomes a story of talking with people in the industry to investigate whether the property Jean and I owned was suitable for developing a green burial cemetery, and whether such a business in Troup County would be viable and enable us to maintain the property as a rural oasis. The first person I talked to was Jeff Higgins. His family's been in the funeral home industry for 3 generations. He told me that there was definitely a trend toward green, or what many call natural burials, but he cautioned us that we would have a big marketing problem because no one would know what we were talking about. No one in this area knew what a green burial was, and many people would think a green burial without embalming was actually against the law. So we obviously had a hill to climb. Nevertheless, he said he personally saw green burials as another option, and that his firm would definitely offer that option. He said it would provide a more satisfying closure for a family than cremations. A burial site in a green cemetery in a forest setting would provide a family with a very nice place to visit for. The green cemetery is a thing in perpetuity. It's there. It's protected by state law. Part of the money, whenever you sell a burial right, goes into a fund, a trust fund. So it's a perpetual care type cemetery, and that's a very, very nice place to visit forever, hopefully. I mean, I'll be there forever, but hopefully the cemetery will be. Okay. Jeff provided me with the names of the only 2 green cemeteries located in Georgia. Milton Fields in Milton, Georgia, and Honey Creek Woodlands in Conyers. Both of these facilities are on the north side of Atlanta. Gene and I visited them and found the staff at each facility to be very helpful and encouraging. But at the same time, they cautioned us that the acceptance of green burials depended on more people learning that such an environmentally friendly option even existed. I was introduced to the Green Burial Guidebook, which is on your table, by the way, and I've got more here. If somebody wants it, you're welcome to take it. Somebody's welcome to take it. Just read it, pass it around. If anybody wanted to buy one, the information, I can get you the information. And I've actually got some at the office. So I was introduced to the Green Burial Guidebook by Elizabeth Portier, and it was published in 2018. It told the story of the rediscovery of natural burials after years of the public becoming acquainted and accustomed to traditional burials with embalming, caskets, and cement vaults. It also listed the registered green cemeteries in the United States. Reading the guidebook, we learned about and eventually met Dr. Billy Campbell and his wife, Kimberly. In 1998, they established the very first exclusively green burial cemetery in the United States, the Ramsey Creek Preserve in Westminster, South Carolina. They also worked to establish the Green Burial Council, which sets standards for being certified as a conservation burial ground. And we've met those standards at Whispering Hills and are certified as a conservation burial ground. This couple are the nation's leading environmentalists and pioneers in the movement toward natural burials. Very much environmentally conscious, so unbelievable. Anyway, Billy gave a TED talk on the subject of natural burials, and this began to create interest throughout the country. Today, there are over 160 exclusively green burial grounds in the U.S. That's from 1998, there was one, and today there are around 160. Clean Tex, not Clean Tex, Whispering Hills, pardon me, 50 years of Clean Tex. Whispering Hills is one of 3 in the state of Georgia. So the Campbells visited us on the Grange to look at our property and advised us on whether it was suitable to develop into a natural burial ground. They were very impressed with the diversity of the flora and the beauty of the land. They encouraged us to seriously consider establishing a green cemetery and gave us important contacts within the industry who could advise us. One of our most helpful contacts was someone we already knew, Clark Johnson, our very own Troup County historian. Clark helped us get the story of the land organized and correct from a historical point of view. We're most grateful for his expert and patient advice in getting the story of the land correct. The little brochure on your table has the words Clark wrote to describe the history of the land. It's beautifully written. I encourage you to take one with you. There's one for everybody. And there's also a map on the table. One of the other contacts put us in touch with this man that makes maps. So on the back, you can see the layout. The green portion on the map is the 20-acre site that the county allocated for the actual cemetery. And the rest is my property and Gene's property, which encompasses the Whispering Hills Memorial Nature Preserve. So the Memorial Nature Preserve contains a 20-acre green cemetery within its boundaries. And there are easements which allow access throughout all the properties. So it's as though it's one property, but really it's 3 properties legally. Speaking of legally, there were many hoops to jump through to get Whispering Hills LLC established and registered as a perpetual care green cemetery. This involved the county, the zoning boards, state governments, cemetery board of the state. I won't go into the details there, except to say there were many hoops to jump through. And we jumped through them all over time. It's been a 3-year project from when this original concept came about. And it was a lot of work, a lot of legal work. Anyway, Whispering Hills started out, this is interesting. Whispering Hills, in my mind, started out as a green cemetery, but it wound up as a nature preserve. Under the guidance of the Campbells, particularly Kimberly, the project was transformed from the original concept as simply a green cemetery into the Whispering Hills Memorial Nature Preserve, which contains a natural green cemetery within its boundaries. A big difference in the concept. We have the Campbells and several people they introduced to us to thank for that. It's required an evolution in thinking on our part that involved embracing the entire project as an environmentally sustainable nature reserve rather than simply a green cemetery. The preserve map on your table was produced by one of their contacts, and a biological survey identifying over 100 species of plants was produced by another of their contacts. The biological survey says what is common, what is invasive, and what is rare. And we do have a couple of rare species on the land. It's very hilly, and you have moist areas and dry areas, and it's quite diverse. I've been there all my life. I never appreciated how diverse it was until our biologist came and told me. So I appreciated the Campbell's help very much. The Whispering Hills Memorial Nature Reserve was officially opened on Earth Day, April 22nd, 2021. Over 200 people attended the opening, and many toured the property. The first interment occurred that day when my friend Alan Rabies, his mother's and his sister's ashes were buried and scattered on a rocky hillside in the forest in a beautiful ceremony conducted by Kimberly and Billy Campbell. In order to understand Whispering Hills, we encourage anyone interested to tour the property. Free guided tours for individual or groups are provided for all first-time visitors. You could just get around and wander around, but you'd be lost. So anyway, we provide a tour. Shirley does, I do, Chris does. Take people around, look at the map, see where we are. After that, everybody's welcome to come wander around on their own, borrow a golf cart to drive back there. We can drive people back there and drop them off and let them walk back out. It's a pretty good little walk to the back of the property, as you can tell from looking at that map. So we encourage people to take a tour. Guided tours are just available to the public on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and on Sundays from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. But we also, Monday through Friday, we can have tours arranged by appointment. Just simply have to call and arrange a convenient time for yourself, and we'll take people or groups around. We have one of the golf carts, I call it, can take 10 people, so we can take a group at a time. And then we have a couple that you can just take one person, and then have one that can take 3 people. So we've got a variety of different transportation things to get people around. And once people get out there, then they feel comfortable going on their own. A lot of people from the city, they don't really know about walking in the woods. So we introduce it to it slowly. But for more information, I encourage you to visit the website. It's got all kind of pictures and maps and a lot of information. It's www.whisperinghillspreserve.com. I think it's probably mentioned on the brochure. I'm encouraging everybody to take. So that's pretty much it. It's about 7 minutes to 1, and I'm happy to. Oh yes. Oh, by the way, I also mentioned I'm very grateful to Ida for putting us on the cover of her magazine, the Highland Living magazine. It's got the word out to a lot of people in the city about what we were doing, and I have plenty here. There's one on the table, but if anybody wants to take one, please do take one. And there's a map on the table, but there's more maps here. It's a two-sided thing. Anybody wants one of them, welcome to take it. The LaGrange News surprised me by coming out with the LaGrange Living magazine, Going Green, with my mug on the cover, and a nice article in there. These photographs were taken on Earth Day when we had the grand opening, if you will, the dedication. And I'm going to get some reprints of them too, because going back to what Jeff told me originally, for this thing to work, you've got to have people that are interested in purchasing green burial sites. So nothing happens in a cemetery until somebody, wants to buy a family plot or winds up being buried there. None of us get out of this life alive. Something's going to happen to all of us. And for me, it was a huge change from being a map maker. I used to have a tag on my car 50 years ago. It said map man. I was in the map business big time. And I was a map man. Maps like these maps here, we made them. we developed a lot of technology having to do with it. I loved it. It was a great career. So suddenly getting involved in the green cemetery business, that is quite a diversion. And I'm enjoying it. I'm learning the language. I appreciate the help I've gotten from Jeff. The other funeral homes, Home in the Grange, Strip of Hamby has been out. They're interested. They're going to provide the service also. I believe it's McKesson up in Hogansville. There's a firm that's contacted Chris from down in Columbus. So slowly the funeral directors are becoming aware of what's going on. So it's a huge educational process. And I particularly appreciate the Rotarians allowing me to come and speak. Now, I'll turn the floor over to questions. Who has a question? Surprise, surprise. Shirley has a question.
Okay, so how, when you consider perpetual care, and I understand there's money going into some bank account someplace, but how about when you two go away? What happens to cemeteries when?
The cemetery is privately owned. The cemetery is owned by a family trust. I had my mother put the property I would have inherited into a generation skipping trust. This was 30 years ago. So the generation skipping trust, when I pass, it goes to my two children, my son and my daughter. And then when Jeannie passes, her portion of her part will go to her daughter, Crystal. So it's a typical family business. And it could be sold. Who God knows what's going to happen in the future. I personally, surely I plan to live forever. So I'm not too worried about it. Yes, Chris.
I want to mention one of our greatest success stories. Shirley kind of mentioned it briefly. The Columbus Inquirer wrote a great story on this cemetery, and it was picked up by the Associated Press, and it went nationwide on the press wire, and over 60 newspapers in the United States ran the story, and U.S. News and World Report picked it up and put it in their virtual magazine. They have 13 million subscribers. So that was a grand slam home run.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing, I met a fellow by the name of Paul Sims, who used to be an announcer for the channel 5 years ago, and he became a PR guy. And based on what Jeff told me, I knew I needed a PR guy, and he's proved to be a real wonder worker. He arranged to get these articles published, and like Chris said, it went nationwide. It was in over 80 newspapers. Sacramento Beat, a friend of mine saw it in Sacramento, for goodness sake. So it was widely published. Now, I didn't get a single call from anybody. But nevertheless, the knowledge about green cemeteries and this type of burial is spreading. Yes, sir.
My admin knew I was coming and saw the subject matter and just went berserk online and doing research and just got all the tree. Had about 30 questions that I only asked them. I'm told that I have to come back with answers. So the first one is, it's a 20-acre space. Is there a maximum number of occupants?
Okay. Let me explain. The actual, when I applied for the zoning, I didn't know how much to ask for. I asked for everything. But the commissioners, when you say cemetery, what pops into their mind? Shalom. Boom, 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 and all the other cemeteries. This is totally different. The population is the Green Burial Council, it has to be less than 500 per acre, I believe, maybe 600. But really it gets down around 200 or 300 because there's a tree here. You can't bury somebody there. You got to bury them over here. And then there's rocks over here, so you don't want to go in with big equipment and disturbing the land and digging up the rocks. So of the 20 acres, about 8 or 9 of the acres are unsuitable for burials. So I'll have to go back to the city council and try to, once it gets going, and explain to them and let them come out and see that I need more land for the thing to really be viable in the long term. And if you look at the map, you'll see that the cemetery doesn't quite reach the core property. I'm hoping in the future that the zoning people, when I go back to them, will let me expand the cemetery up to the core property. Because at the top of that map, if it went up to the core property, that's on a hill, and then you can actually look down over the lake. So this property backs up to the lake, well, it backs up to the core property, and then you've got the lake, and then across the river, you've got the 9,000 acre memorial. So it is an oasis. It's sort of the last place on the right going toward the river that's going to be protected. So, and I had to work with the Webb Cemetery people who help you plot where, you gotta keep up with where bodies are buried. And so there's an organization that does it, but they did it according to like the Chatelaw did, bingity. So anyway, after much discussion and so forth, they've agreed to license us, if you will, and map out up to 2,000 sites wherever. So I've got 13 benches out there. All the benches are GPS. All the graves will be GPS. And so it's one of these deals where somebody can say, geez, I like that big rock over there. I want a site near there. Somebody else said, I want one over there. So it's not like it's all mapped out and you got to pick one. I think that's the magic hour.
Can you stick around if anybody has any other?
Yeah, I'm going to stick around, and my associates are going to stick around. And Jeff also has agreed to ask if anybody has any technical questions. So we're not going to leave you.
Thank you so much, Ralph. That was fantastic. In honor of your speaking today, we're going to make a donation to Polio Plus, which is Rotary's drive to eradicate polio across the entire world. So thank you for being here. We appreciate it. He'll stick around if anybody has any questions. We're going to have a board meeting next door. I'm going to put up the Zoom for the largest Rotary meeting. If you can stick around, you get a makeup for both of those. If nothing else, we're adjourned. Thank you.